The young girl is terrified, surrounded by the horrific aftermath of a brutal massacre in her own village. Gunfire echoes through the air as ruthless soldiers of the Southeast Asian Triad close in on her, ready to eliminate the very last survivor of their merciless purge. But before the heavily armed men can pull the trigger and end her life, the very man who led the slaughter suddenly turns his weapon on his own comrades. His name is Ito, a terrifying and elite enforcer for the Triad, and in a split second of unimaginable remorse, he unleashes a hail of bullets on his own team to protect the innocent child amidst the deafening chaos. He desperately yells at the young girl, whose name is Reina, telling her to run for her life. Bloodied, heavily exhausted, and severely wounded from the frantic, close-quarters shootout, Ito knows he has just signed his own death warrant by betraying the most powerful crime syndicate in the world. Desperate to survive and protect the girl, Ito manages to escape the blood-soaked village and hide Reina inside a dark, dingy apartment in the city. The door suddenly creeps open and a woman discovers them hiding in the shadows. Reina is terrified, asking the stranger who she is, and the woman softly reveals her name is Shinta. Shinta is Ito's former girlfriend, a ghost from a life he left behind long ago. Seeing Ito bleeding out on the floor, she immediately rushes into action, directing him to the painkillers resting by the old sink. As she carefully and painfully tends to his deep gunshot wounds, Ito quietly thanks her for everything, acknowledging that this is far from the first time she has had to patch him up after a violent disaster. Shinta is overwhelmed with a mixture of profound relief and bitter anger. She fiercely berates him, telling him that it has been 3 long, agonizing years since he disappeared, and yet he still hasn't changed at all. She calls him utterly reckless and undeniably stupid. As the tension thickens in the small room, Shinta pulls him close and demands to know the truth. She needs him to explain exactly where he went for all those years, and more importantly, who the terrified young girl is. Ito, carrying the immense, crushing weight of his sins, solemnly tells Shinta that it is much better if she remains completely in the dark. He insists that his silence is for her own good, desperately wanting to keep her safe from the apocalyptic violence that is surely coming his way. But Shinta refuses to accept his protective lies. Her voice trembles with raw, unfiltered emotion as she screams that everyone thought he was dead. She cries out that they all mourned him, believing he had perished while he was secretly out there somewhere. Ito tries to calm her, softly reassuring her that he is right here, but the emotional damage is already done. Realizing that the situation is far too dangerous for her to handle alone, Shinta admits that she didn't know what else to do with him, so she secretly made a phone call to get help. Moments later, the apartment door swings open, and Ito's former criminal associates walk in. Among them is Bobby, a heavily addicted, foul-mouthed wildcard who instantly glares at Ito with pure, venomous hatred. Bobby tells Ito that if he weren't so ugly, he would have already punched him squarely in the face. Ito offers a quiet, regretful apology, but Bobby is entirely unconvinced. He violently demands to know why Ito is doing this. Bobby points out that Ito had a completely solid, highly respected spot within the ranks of the Triad. He spent 3 brutal years building his reputation, only to carelessly throw his entire empire away just to save one random kid. Ito remains completely stoic, looking Bobby dead in the eye, and firmly states that Bobby would have done the exact same thing if he were in his shoes. Realizing that they are running out of time, Ito asks what their plan is, but his old friend Fadi quickly shuts him down, aggressively stating that there is no "our" in this situation. Ito explains his desperate strategy. He urgently needs to retrieve his hidden stash of money so he can purchase brand new identities for himself and Reina. Once the fake passports are secured, he promises to leave Indonesia entirely and vanish for a better life. Fadi is completely incredulous, questioning how Ito plans to take on the entire Triad completely alone. Ito insists that he doesn't want Shinta or the rest of his former crew to get dragged into his deadly mess. He asks about the rest of their old gang, but Fadi delivers crushing news. Most of their friends are either dead or serving life sentences in miserable prisons. Fadi reveals that the only ones left are himself, Bobby, and Wisnu, Fadi's young, highly eager cousin who utterly hero-worships Ito. Bobby's anger suddenly boils over into a violent rage. He aggressively confronts Ito, screaming that Ito heartlessly abandoned them all years ago. Bobby reminds Ito that he essentially served the Triad just to buy their freedom, but he is tired of being treated like garbage. Ito furiously fires back, reminding the cocaine-addicted Bobby of exactly who dealt with their enemies in the past, completely asserting his dominance. After the explosive argument settles down, Fadi seriously warns Ito that his reckless actions have undoubtedly alerted local gang members. He reminds Ito that he has an incredibly long list of dangerous enemies, and right now, he has absolutely no one left to watch his back. Fadi begs Ito to simply trust them this one time, but Ito hauntingly replies that they have absolutely no idea what horrific things he has been through over the past 3 years. Meanwhile, halfway across the continent, in the glowing, neon-drenched city of Macau, another piece of the puzzle is violently falling into place. A man named Arian, an impeccably dressed enforcer and Ito's former closest brother-in-arms, is currently stationed there by the Triad. Arian is in the middle of entertaining a highly arrogant, extremely powerful superior within the Triad hierarchy. The superior is completely ruthless and incredibly demanding. When a young, terrified waitress accidentally spills a small drop of wine on the superior's expensive pants, the boss erupts into a furious rage. He violently insults her, mercilessly beating her while demanding to know how Arian plans to make up for this profound disrespect. Arian, trying to keep the peace, humbles himself and offers his most prized wine, but the superior only continues to humiliate him, calling him a dirty foreigner and forcing Arian to pour the drink himself. The superior's relentless cruelty finally crosses a fatal line when he violently attacks the waitress again, screaming that he will kill her. Arian completely snaps. In a blinding, terrifying flash of lethal precision, Arian ruthlessly attacks. He brutally slaughters every single one of the superior's bodyguards in the room, moving with terrifying speed and devastating martial arts skills. Within seconds, the lavish VIP room is entirely painted in blood, and everyone is dead except for the heavily traumatized waitress. Arian calmly instructs his men to clean up her wounds and safely escort her out of the building. As he wipes the fresh blood from his knuckles, Arian suddenly receives an ominous, encrypted phone call from his highest-ranking boss, the deeply feared Qian Wu. Qian Wu informs Arian that his old friend Ito has completely gone rogue, betraying the Syndicate. Qian Wu gives Arian a strict, chilling ultimatum. Arian must personally hunt down and kill Ito. If Arian successfully completes this horrific task, Qian Wu promises that Arian will instantly inherit Ito's highly coveted position as one of the 6 C's, the elite, untouchable leaders of the Triad. Back in Jakarta, Ito is desperately putting his escape plan into motion. Fadi is secretly working on forging the new passports for Ito and Reina, managing to snap a quick, adorable photo of the young girl. However, they are entirely out of funds. Fadi reluctantly reveals that after Ito and Arian left them years ago, the crew's fortunes took a massive, catastrophic nosedive. A man named Johan, who used to be their pathetic, lowly errand boy, ended up stealing all of their remaining hard cash. Johan used their stolen money to build his own massive, highly illegal empire, dealing dangerous narcotics out of a freezing, heavily guarded meat locker. Fadi warns Ito that Johan has dramatically risen through the criminal ranks, recently being promoted to a Triad red stick. If Ito wants his money back, he will have to pry it from Johan's heavily armed hands. Fadi tells Ito that he has already booked a smuggling boat for him and the kid, leaving the rest of the violent mission entirely in Ito's capable hands. Determined to secure his freedom, Ito fearlessly marches straight into Johan's massive, intimidating butcher shop. Johan is standing proudly among hanging animal carcasses, acting incredibly arrogant. He smugly tells Ito that he recognizes his face and begins sarcastically offering him different cuts of meat. Ito has absolutely zero patience for the games. In a flash of pure aggression, he suddenly shoves a loaded gun directly against Johan's head, demanding his stolen cash. Johan is initially shocked, but quickly regains his cocky demeanor, taunting Ito that he used to be the craziest killer in the harbor. Johan gleefully explains that while the Triad has their legendary 6 C's, he has his own personal death squad, known as the 7 Butchers. Suddenly, massive, heavily armed men wielding enormous meat cleavers and sharp hooks emerge from the freezing shadows of the slaughterhouse. A terrifying, incredibly brutal fight erupts. Ito uses everything in his environment to survive, dodging massive swinging blades and using bone-crushing strikes to perfectly dismantle Johan's elite killers. The fight is an absolute bloodbath, with Ito utilizing terrifying strength and lethal endurance to tear through the butchers one by one. After a grueling, exhausting massacre, Ito finally corners the terrified Johan, ruthlessly beating him into submission. Desperate to survive, Johan screams that Ito is a complete idiot. He maliciously reveals that he has already made a phone call, tipping off the Triad. Johan laughs as he confesses that an entire army of Triad killers is currently swarming Fadi's apartment to slaughter everyone inside. Ito is filled with absolute, paralyzing dread. He ruthlessly kills Johan, but as he attempts to escape the butcher shop, he is suddenly ambushed and violently captured by a squad of highly corrupt police officers who are secretly on the Triad's payroll. They drag Ito into the back of a dark police van, trapping him. Meanwhile, back at the apartment complex, Bobby is nervously escorting Shinta down the hallway, aggressively urging her to leave the building and go stay with her family. Just as they reach the elevator, Bobby spots a massive, heavily armed group of Triad henchmen silently entering the lobby. Realizing the apocalyptic danger, Bobby quickly and forcefully pushes Shinta into the elevator, desperately screaming at her that it's over between them to ensure she stays inside and escapes safely. With Shinta out of the line of fire, Bobby completely embraces his inner madness. He fearlessly marches back toward the apartment, loudly declaring himself as White Boy Bobby and wildly screaming for the Triad goons to shoot him. A massive, deafening shootout explodes in the narrow, claustrophobic hallways. Bobby regroups with Fadi and Wisnu inside the apartment, and the three heavily outgunned men make a completely desperate, heroic last stand. The apartment is quickly torn to absolute shreds by relentless machine gun fire. Bobby is completely manic, fighting with terrifying, unhinged ferocity, while Wisnu bravely tries to hold the line to protect Reina, who is hiding in the back room. Through sheer, unbelievable willpower and brutal teamwork, the three men miraculously manage to wipe out the entire first wave of Triad attackers. They take a brief, highly agonizing moment to catch their breath, completely surrounded by dead bodies and shattered drywall, foolishly believing they have actually survived the horrific ordeal. However, the corrupt cops sitting outside in the police van are listening to the police scanner, happily waiting for the gangs to completely slaughter each other so they can simply sweep up the remains. The cops have been specifically ordered by Qian Wu to lock down the area. Suddenly, the true nightmare arrives at the apartment. Two of Qian Wu's most elite, terrifyingly lethal female assassins, Alma and Elena, elegantly step into the blood-soaked hallway. They are members of the legendary Lotus Formation, and they completely radiate pure, silent death. The remaining apartment defenders have absolutely no chance. Elena moves with impossible, terrifying speed, effortlessly overwhelming Bobby and brutally murdering him in front of his friends. Alma is equally as ruthless, swiftly and mercilessly killing the young, brave Wisnu. Fadi is completely cornered, heavily bruised, and staring completely empty-handed at his imminent, unavoidable death. But just as Alma moves in for the final, lethal strike, Arian suddenly bursts into the room, moving like a perfectly calculated hurricane. Arian effortlessly beats Alma back, utilizing superior, dazzling martial arts to force the deadly assassins to retreat. Fadi is initially relieved to see his old friend, but that relief quickly turns to sheer, crushing horror. Fadi suddenly connects the dots, violently realizing that Arian is the only person outside of their immediate crew who could have possibly known about this highly secretive safe house. Fadi furiously accuses Arian of ratting them out to the Triad, bringing this massive slaughter directly to their doorstep. Arian looks deeply conflicted and desperately tries to explain himself. He admits he initially betrayed them, but claims he completely changed his mind. He begs Fadi to let him form a brand new crew with him and Ito, completely free from the Syndicate's control. But Fadi is entirely disgusted by the deep betrayal. He coldly fires a warning shot directly at Arian, completely rejecting the treacherous offer, and grabs Reina to flee into the dangerous night. Fadi and Reina manage to escape the apartment building, fleeing in a stolen car. But as they drive through the dark, empty streets, Fadi spots a massive roadblock of heavily armed Triad soldiers, waiting for them in the shadows. Knowing exactly what is about to happen, Fadi urgently orders Reina to get down and hide. He bravely steps out of the car to face the impossible odds alone. The Triad soldiers completely unleash hell, completely filling Fadi with bullets. Mortally wounded and rapidly bleeding out on the cold pavement, Fadi prepares for the end. The soldiers advance to finish off Reina, but before they can reach the terrified girl, a mysterious, highly lethal woman suddenly drops from the darkness. Known only as the Operator, she moves like a perfect, silent ghost. With terrifying, surgical precision, she completely slays every single Triad soldier in mere seconds, leaving the street entirely bathed in blood. What happens in Part 2? You won't believe the ending.